Welcome to the 4Heroes podcast. This is another episode from the 4Heroes Huddle, a weekly Bible study with one of our local law enforcement agencies. Chaplain Frank Mercer is teaching through the book of Exodus, an encouraging book that reveals a ton about who God is and the plans he has for his people. The Israelites had cried out to God to save them from their suffering, and he decides to act. God shows up in the form of a burning bush and calls Moses, a shepherd in exile, to lead Israel out of Egypt.
Well, I'm glad to see you guys. Welcome to the Huddle. This is the April 22nd edition of the Huddle. And it's good to see your smiling faces this morning. You've obviously had some coffee and a little bit of time to wake up. So welcome to Monday. We were reading the story of Moses in Exodus, and the last time we saw Moses, he was running. He's running for his life, literally, and he runs from Egypt to Midian. It's about 250 miles as the crow flies on a straight line from Egypt to Midian. That's the way he's going to go later when he takes the Israelites out of Egypt to Midian, because he's able just to, walk through the Red Sea. But he doesn't have that advantage this time. It's more than 250 miles. It'd be really hard to say exactly how far he went, how many steps he took, because he detours up to the north and over the top end of the Red Sea and back down to the south into the Sinai Peninsula. And he's on these mountain roads, these winding mountain roads that spin and spin and spin and curve and curve and curve. You ever been on a mountain road like that? You ever drive on the Dragon's Tail? Is that Tennessee or North Carolina? It's on the line, yeah. It just spins and spins and spins and
318 turns in 2 miles.
318 turns in 2 miles. Wow. And a whole bunch of folks who don't make it from one end to the other. I know the one time I was on it in the family SUV, I saw pieces of motorcycle and trucks and cars just littering the side of the road, people who didn't make the turn. I remember there was one turn called the Gravity Cavity. And that's kind of how it felt, just feel everything in the car shift as you make that. And we were just puttering along. I don't know, Moses can't really afford to putter because he is running for his life. But around those curvy mountain roads into the Sinai desert, he stops at a well. That's where we were last week in the beginning of Exodus 2. He stops at a well, finds water in the middle of the desert. There's a man named Reuel going forward after Exodus 2 in the narrative. He's referred to as Jethro usually. Less formal. I like Jethro more than Reuel. Reuel sounds like Star Trek or Star Wars. Jethro, that's one of the Clampets. I can relate to Jethro. Jethro has all these daughters. He's priest of Midian, and he also has a pretty large sheep raising enterprise, and he has all these daughters. He sends them with sheep to get water at this well where Moses is just kind of collapsed after his long run, and here come these other shepherds. They sort of step in front of these women, and they're like bullying them. Our sheep get the water, you guys go back home, that kind of thing. I'm adding a little bit to the narrative, the flavor of it, but that's the flavor of it. Moses won't stand for it. He's not going to have it. He stands up and stands up to the bully. Hey, Don. I'm glad you're here. Stands up to the bullies and runs them off, and then goes the extra mile and actually waters the women's sheep. And all of this wins him an invitation to dinner. That's cool. And so he meets Jethro. I don't know how much of his story he felt comfortable sharing, but Jethro gives him a job as a shepherd. And eventually, Jethro gives him a bride in one of his daughters, Zipporah. And Moses and Zipporah give Jethro 2 grandsons. And this is just kind of the way life is going now. No longer a prince of Egypt. Now I'm a shepherd. I've traded in a silver spoon for a wooden staff, and I spend every day watching sheep, not even my sheep. He doesn't even own the sheep he's watching. They're his father-in-law's sheep. Just working for Zipporah's dad. Just trying to stay hidden. If I can get through the next 40 years without anybody noticing me, maybe I can die in peace. Nothing much happens in Midian. It seems like a safe place to be. And then there's this footnote at the end of chapter 2. End of Exodus 2 says, during that long period, those 40 years, that king of Egypt died. And the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of slavery went up to God. And God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And so God looked on the Israelites and was concerned for them. You may be wondering, what does the Bible mean when it says God remembered? Does that mean that God forgets things? As far as I understand how God reveals himself in the Bible, the only thing God forgets is our sin. It's really more that he chooses not to remember them anymore. It's not that God is forgetful. This is an example of a figure of speech. I'm going to give you a big word here, okay? Anthropomorphism. It's a figure of speech that borrows from human qualities and characteristics to a divine being. What it means is that our language is inadequate. You're trying to understand a being that is beyond our understanding. And so when it says that God remembers, it's a way of saying we feel forgotten. Now, you've felt that. I've felt that. I mean, if you're really honest, most of us have felt that. I'm sure that Moses felt that. And for sure, Israelite slaves in Egypt who've been in bondage for 400 years, they've certainly felt that. But God didn't forget them. I mean, it's an anthropomorphism when the Bible says that God was sorry that he created man, or that God changed his mind, or that God has feelings of jealousy, or by his outstretched hands, or he makes the earth his footstool. It's not that God ever felt sorry or felt jealous rage, not in the way that we understand jealousy. He doesn't have arms, he's a spirit. He doesn't have feet, he's a spirit. It's not those things. It's the inadequacy of language and the writer trying to help you understand something that is really beyond our understanding. God has not forgotten them. After hearing the cries of his people and hearing the prayers of his people, those prayers were not wasted. Their pain was not wasted. God has heard that. God has seen that. And now it's time to do something about it. And you start in the next chapter, chapter 3, and it starts with Moses doing what he's been doing for 40 years. I mean, he was 40 years old when he got there, and another 40 years have gone by. He is not a young man anymore. All the kids he went to high school with, they're getting the senior adult discount at the Dunkin' Donuts now. They're cashing in their 401ks and buying an RV, playing pickleball in their spare time. They're living their best lives, but Moses is still tending sheep. Again, not even his sheep. and it just feels like his life is going to wind down to a pretty unspectacular conclusion. He's just playing out the hand he's been dealt, not anticipating anything, just going to let the clock run out. Charles Barkley says Father Time is undefeated, and that's what he anticipates. And I mean, really, what else could you anticipate? Just look around where he is. Nothing ever happens there. I mean, this is his address. Nowheresville, Midian. That's where he gets his mail. You ever drive down a really ugly stretch of road and look around and think, man, I'm glad I don't live here? That's where he lives. He lives down that really ugly stretch of road. I got a friend who right now is on a Bible tour, and he keeps sending pictures and posting pictures, and he's riding camels. He's getting off the tour bus and he's taking pictures with his iPhone of Bedouin shepherds. He is having a great time. He'll get him a cold bottle of water out of the cooler that the tour guide has, and he'll get back on that air-conditioned tour bus and sit in a nice, soft, cushioned seat and look out his tinted window at the view. He may be in some of the same places that Moses was, but that was not Moses' experience there. Moses lived there, and nothing ever happened there. He didn't just get up one morning and say, "Today's the day it all changes." He just showed up for work, and you just never know what's going to happen if you'll show up for work. 99% of your life is just ordinary. Day after day of getting up, taking a shower, getting dressed, grab some breakfast, get out the door, go to work, take a break for lunch, go back to work, go home at the end of the day, sit with the family, watch a little TV, eat some dinner, go back to bed so you can get up the next morning and just do it all over again. And that's what Moses has been doing for 40 years, for 14,600 days. This is what Moses has been doing, the same thing day after day after day. And then one day 14,601, an extraordinary thing happened that changed Moses' ordinary life. Exodus chapter 3, starting in verse 2, says this: "There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire within a bush, and Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. And so Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. Why does the bush not burn up?" Now, I've learned something. I've learned that it's not unusual in that heat that if there is a bush that gets really dried out in that heat, in that part of the world, that sometimes the bush just catches on fire. You've got fuel, you've got heat, you've got oxygen. Those are the three necessary elements to start a fire. That's what they taught me at the fire department. Those three things. And you have all three of those, and sometimes bushes will just combust. They'll just start burning. But the bush burns, right? That's what's unusual about this. The flames do not consume the bush. And so Moses is curious. And when the Lord saw that he'd gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses." I don't know what it sounded like. "Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." "Do not come any closer," God says. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is on holy ground." The bush knows my name? It's not the bush knows my name. The fire knows my name? Well, here's another big word for you. Theophany is a physical manifestation, occurs with some regularity in the Old Testament of the presence of God. Israelites following in the wilderness, a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. That's a theophany. This is a theophany, this burning bush. It's a physical manifestation of God. God is present in this place. He sees you. He knows you. He has found you. He's calling you by name. God calling you by name. Take off your shoes. It's a sign of respect in many places in the world. It's also a sign of humility on the part of the person who takes their shoes off. You're on holy ground. Let me just read to you this portion, starting in Exodus 3, verse 5. "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground." And then he says, "I am the God of your father." Whoa. His adopted father is the Pharaoh's son-in-law, right? "I'm the God of your father," your biological father. That's personal. You don't just know me by name. You know my family. I'm the God of your father. And not only that, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, that Mount Rushmore of patriarchs. And at this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So notice the I have come down to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians, to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. I have come down to rescue them, right? I go to verse 10, and God says, so now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Did you notice that? I'm coming down. I'm going to rescue them. Yes, God. That's amazing. Go get them, God. You know, I tried that once about 40 years ago. I killed this Egyptian guy and buried him in the sand. It didn't work out for me, but it's going to work out great for you. This is amazing. It's about time somebody did something about that. And then he hears so now go, I'm sending you. What's that? What's that you say? Why me? You said, wait a minute. God, you said you were coming. You were going to rescue them. What's this? You go business. The late, great E.V. Hill. I love to listen to E.V. Hill preach. Preached a message one time called You Are God's Answer. You are God's answer. And he said about this text, Moses going was God's coming down. They were synonymous. I'm going. You're coming with me. The answer to the problems in your family, the answer to the problems where you work, the answer to the problems in your church, the answer to the problems in our world begin with the people we look in the mirror at. You know? With God leading, you go. And you might be thinking, Moses is a Bible guy, and Bible guys always do the right thing, right? Well, not always. Surely as a Bible guy, he'll say, O Lord, I shall go wherever thou send me. I'm happy to go. I was hoping you'd send me. But that is not at all what Moses says. You want to know what Moses said? Well, you'll have to come back next week. But for now, know this. God sees you. He sees you. He knows you by name. And He is calling you out. He is not forgotten about you, and He is ready to transform your ordinary day, your ordinary life, into something extraordinary. That's what life is like on a Tuesday at 2:30 in Nowheresville, Midian. That's all I got to say about that. Can I pray for you? Let me pray for you.
Thank you for listening to the 4Heroes podcast. We hope that it was a reminder that God sees you and is calling you to a purpose specifically designed for you. A purpose that will offer hope and help to those who are crying out and searching for answers. Maybe you're still searching. If you've never made the decision to put your trust and faith in Jesus as the answer, we would love to talk to you more about that. You can get in touch with us by email, through social media, or by texting the word MORE to 770-301-5580.